All right, so this next topic is very exciting for me. I love talking about water. Water has so many unique characteristics and properties that make life on Earth not only possible, but just incredibly unlikely to happen anywhere else without water. Everything in life, in this life on planet Earth, is water based, and it's because water is such an incredible, miraculous molecule. And so I get really excited when we start talking about the properties of water. But almost all of these unique properties of water can be traced back to its polarity and its ability to hydrogen bond. And because of the polarity, water is an amazing solvent. It'll dissolve anything that is polar and charged. Things like sodium chloride, so salt, table salt, dissolves so easily in water. So because of the strength of those hydrogen bonds, water is both adhesive and cohesive. This makes it an incredible transport medium, which we'll get to a little bit later. But cohesion refers to the ability of water molecules to cling to each other due to that hydrogen bonding. And because of its cohesive properties, water can exist as a liquid under the normal temperatures and pressures that are present on the Earth's surface. So because water has this strong affinity, one water molecule for another, and those hydrogen bonds collectively are very, very strong, water doesn't vaporize. Like the pressures here on Earth are not that high. Air pressures aren't that high, and our temperatures are relatively warm compared to many other planets. But because of the strength of our water molecules, or the strength of those hydrogen bondings, water doesn't just instantly vaporize. It actually exists in a liquid form, which many substances do not exist in a liquid form under these normal temperatures and pressures. And adhesion refers to the ability of water molecules to cling to other polar surfaces. And this property, again, is due to water's polarity. Multicellular animals often contain internal vessels in which water assists the transport of nutrients and waste. So, just for example, the cohesive and adhesive properties of water allow blood to fill tubular vessels of the cardiovascular system. So, your cardiovascular system, think about all of those the veins that you have and the capillaries and arteries running through your body. Your blood is mostly water. And because water sticks to each other and it sticks to the sides of the walls, your water will actually fill up the tubes, fill up your capillary tubes, will fill up your veins, fill up your arteries, keep them full, but also keep water flowing and passing through those arteries and passing through those veins to get nutrients where they need to go and waste where they need to go. It also contributes in an incredible way to the transport of water in plants. I don't know if you're aware of this, but plants have a vascular system very similar to humans in that they've got vessels that transport nutrients and water from the roots up to the shoots. They also have transport vesicles that take food, glucose, down from the leaves all the way back down to the roots. And the way they do this is by utilizing those cohesive and adhesive properties of water. Water is so sticky that at the surface of a leaf, if a stomata opens up and a water molecule evaporates off the surface of the leaf, as it's leaving the surface of the leaf, it will draw up the water molecule behind it, which in turn will draw up the water molecule behind it. Think of the water molecules in the venules of the leaves. Think of them as like chains on a string, and as you pull one chain up, it'll pull the chain behind it, and in turn it'll lift the entire string. And this is how water is drawn up from the roots. They don't have pumps. They don't have a heart that's going to force water up from the roots all the way to the shoots. Instead, they rely on the cohesive adhesive properties. One water molecule evaporates off the top. As it's leaving, it draws another water molecule up behind it, draws another water molecule up behind it, draws another water molecule up behind it. And as it does so, it's bringing all the nutrients that are dissolved in that water up all the way through the tree, or all the way through the plant, all the way out to the leaves. And so this is due to the stickiness of water. Water will stick to each other, and water will also stick to the walls, the sides of those plants, and prevent that water from like backsliding all the way down to the roots. So it's really cool. Water is really cool because of these polar relationships, or these polar bonds. So water is both cohesive and adhesive. Water is also an incredible solvent. It really is. Water is, due to its polar nature, has the ability to dissolve almost any other polar molecule. So to help us with our terminology, we're going to talk about a solution. A solution contains dissolved substances or dissolved solutes. So a solute is a substance that's dissolved in a solvent to create a solution. So just as an example, let's look at a solution of salt water. So if you take a bunch of salt, you put it in water, you shake it up. I don't know, maybe you've got a sore throat and you're going to gargle salt water. What you have created is a solution. Salt is your solute that's going to dissolve in your water or your solvent to create your solution. So that's that terminology. Now, there are some molecules that dissolve very readily in water. These are called hydrophilic molecules, and they're going to be mostly polar molecules or ions. They're going to dissolve very rapidly in water. That term, hydrophilic, literally means water, or hydreus, a Greek meaning of water, and philic comes from the Greek word phileo, meaning for love. Hydrophilic, literally water-loving. Those are going to dissolve very readily in water. Hydrophobic molecules, on the other hand, do not dissolve so quickly in water. Hydro meaning water, phobic meaning to fear. Water-fearing molecules do not dissolve readily in water. These tend to attract, hydrophobic molecules tend to associate with non-polar molecules, molecules that do not have polar bonds. Great example of this would be oil. Have you ever seen vegetable oil and water mixed together? And you've heard the term, water and oil don't mix? They don't. Oil is non-polar. It has no partial positive charge, no partial negative charge, has no interest in water. Water has no interest in it. So non-polar molecules will dissolve in non-polar solutions. So hydrophobic molecules will dissolve in non-polar solutions. Hydrophilic molecules will dissolve in polar solutions like water. Water, in addition to all the wonderful things we've already said, has an incredibly high heat capacity. Heat capacity refers to a substance's ability to absorb energy without actually changing in temperature. Water, just for reference, requires 1 calorie of energy to raise the temperature by 1 degree Celsius for 1 gram of water. Just for reference, other covalently bonded liquids require only half as much energy. It actually takes a lot of energy to boil a pot of water. A ton of energy to boil a pot of water. Because in order to boil that pot of water, in order to increase the temperature of water, you have to vibrate, shake, and add energy to every single one of those hydrogen bonds, which are so strong that water can actually absorb a lot of energy without changing in temperature. That's amazing. That's so important. Can anybody tell me why? Maybe I'll throw that out there as a bonus question. Why do we care about water having a high heat capacity? What does that mean for life here on Earth? Think about think about it in a lot of different ways. We, as human beings, as animals, as living species, we are primarily water, and our Earth is mostly water. So, starting there, why is it so significant that water has a high heat capacity? What does that mean for life here on Earth? In addition to having a high heat capacity, water has a high heat of vaporization. It's pretty much two sides of the same coin, I guess, or it's a continuation. Just as it requires a lot of heat or a lot of energy to increase the temperature of water, it requires a lot of energy to vaporize water, even more energy to vaporize water. So this high heat of vaporization gives animals in hot environments an efficient way to release body heat. What do you do when you're hot? Like, what is your bodily response to very high temperatures? What does your body do? And how does that relate back to the high heat of vaporization? So yes, give me your thoughts on that. Maybe chime in and we'll discuss it during our evening discussion groups. So that's water has a high heat of vaporization. Those hydrogen bonds must be broken in order to evaporate water. So the next thing we want to talk about is the ionization of water. We've discussed the ionization of certain solutes when dissolved in water. Ionization just means breaking apart into its ions. So just like sodium chloride will break apart into sodium ions and chlorine ions when dissolved in water, water will actually disassociate and ionize itself. So if you have a glass of water, you don't have a glass of H2O2. You have a glass of H2O2 and hydrogen ions and hydroxide ions. Water can dissociate and ionize and release an equal number of hydrogen and hydroxide ions. This is going to become very important when we start to discuss pH, or the acidity and basicity of certain molecules. Acids and bases are going to react very differently in water. Acidic solutions like lemon juice, tomatoes, coffee, they're all going to disassociate in water, and they're going to release hydrogen ions in water. So if we have water sitting there, and water is equal parts H2O2, hydrogen ions, and hydroxide ions, if we were to put something in that water that suddenly released a whole bunch of hydroxide ions, we would have an overabundance of hydrogen ions. We'd have an overabundance of hydrogen ions floating around. And so the acidity of a solution is acidic solutions, or anything we consider an acid, is going to release hydrogen ions in water. And the acidity of a substance depends on how fully it dissociates in water. Strong acids are going to break down completely in water. Weak acids are only going to break down part of the way. Basic solutions, like milk of magnesia, ammonia, those are going to be very common basic solutions. Basic solutions will either absorb hydrogen ions or they'll release hydroxide ions, those OH ions. If a strong base is placed in water, the number of hydroxide ions is going to increase. What the pH scale measures is the concentration of hydrogen ions. The pH scale is used to indicate the acidity or the alkalinity of a solution. Alkalinity is just another word for like the basicness. Acidity is how much hydrogen ions are there. Alkalinity is how many hydroxide ions are there. The pH scale is going to measure the hydrogen ion concentration. And the pH scale ranges from 0 to 14, with 7 representing neutrality, where hydrogen ion concentration is equal to that of the hydroxide ion concentration. So if we have equal amounts of hydrogen ions and hydroxide ions, we have a pH of 7. Does anybody know what substance we have been talking about this whole time that has a pH of 7? Yeah, very good. Very good. Water. Water has a pH of 7. Since water dissociates evenly into hydrogen and hydroxide ions, it is considered neutral at pH. Anything below is neutral at pH of 7. Anything below 7, a pH of 7, is considered acidic. Anything above a pH of 7 is considered to be basic. So the lower the pH on the pH scale, the greater the acidity, the higher the pH, the more basic a solution. Now here's a great example of that. I'll let you spend a little bit of time with this diagram on your own. But one thing I want to mention is that pH is incredibly important. Remember when we talked about maintaining homeostasis and how there are certain mechanisms our body has to help maintain our internal temperature? We also have mechanisms to help maintain our internal pH. We use things known as buffers. Buffers help prevent dramatic changes in pH. A buffer is a chemical or a combination of chemicals that keep that pH within normal limits. In living organisms, the pH of body fluids usually needs to be maintained within a very, very narrow range in order for molecules to function correctly. And buffers just help maintain those limits by taking up extra hydrogen ions from solution or releasing hydrogen ions into the solution in order to kind of maintain balance. The health of organisms requires maintaining that pH within very narrow ranges. Just an example of those narrow ranges, human blood is a pH of like 7.4, which is ever so slightly basic. If that drops below 7, we result in acidosis. Anything above a 7.8 results in alkalosis. Both of those can be very, very deadly to the body. And so we have a very narrow range that we need to maintain. And so we do this by using a buffer for example, we use carbonic acid as a buffer that'll dissociate and reform to reduce those changes in pH. So carbonic acid is a weak acid. It just dissociates very a little bit and then reforms. But when needed, it can add hydrogen ions to the blood, or it can absorb hydrogen ions out of the blood to help